Hello, I'm Jane Pauley.
And I'm Stone Phillips. You're about to look at a live shot, there it is, from Somalia, and the promise of a new day. Waves of United States Marines now coming in off ships, 11 of them out in the Indian Ocean. They have been coming in for about an hour and a half now, arriving at the airport in the capital city of Mogadishu. They have also made landfall along the coast, that in the early morning hours today. So far, no shots have been fired, a calm beginning for a major humanitarian operation on the Horn of Africa. Quite an event, a military power descending on a foreign land, not for conquest, but out of compassion. Somalia is our Dateline tonight.
Tonight, a special edition of Dateline NBC.
American forces on an unprecedented mission of mercy. Restore hope to a nation where anarchy reigns, where millions have been without food, where famine threatens to wipe out an entire generation of children. The need is overwhelming. But what are the risks? And are the American people behind a rescue mission to Somalia?
From our studios in New York, here are Stone Phillips and Jane Pauley.
And good evening. To cover the Somalia story, we're delaying our scheduled reports until a future Dateline broadcast. In a moment, we'll go to Tom Brokaw at Mogadishu International Airport in the capital city. Yesterday, Tom predicted that the biggest problem the Marines might encounter would be crowd control from welcoming Somalis. He was partly right, but it wasn't a crowd of Somalis, but a crowd of news cameras and photographers who met the Navy SEALs as they came ashore tonight. Bizarre? Very. And yet it was undoubtedly the media coverage of starving Somalia that inspired this unprecedented military operation. So maybe it was appropriate, but still it was bizarre. Just to situate you, Somalia, about the size of Texas, is located on the east coast of Africa on the Indian Ocean. The port city of Mogadishu is the entry point for the Marines, and Tom Brokaw is there now. And what is the latest, Tom?
Jane, good morning. I say good morning because it's just shortly after 6 o'clock in the morning here in Somalia. This is the airport at Mogadishu, Somalia, which has now been taken over effectively by the Marines who were put ashore by the USS Juno. You can see that in the background. And then in the distance there, the USS Rushmore. Those are called landing dock ships. They launched hovercraft. Helicopters have been landing here as well. They have now secured the perimeter from this area. And for a time, it did look like a sequel to the Dr. Strangelove movie. Here were Marines coming ashore in the pre-dawn darkness and at first light, rousting innocent Somalians from their sleep, putting them spread eagle on the tarmac, putting guns at them. And then the general, Frank Labuti, the commander of the Marines, seeing that this was not a good situation from a public relations point of view, conferred briefly with the Pakistani general in charge here, but they were both swarmed by the television crews from around the world who have gathered for this occasion. And then General Labuti walked back and he said to the Somalians, "You can go." So that's the scene here at this hour. It will be going on for some time more this morning as they get the airport fully secured so they can land still more Marines, the beginning of a force that will rank somewhere near 28,000 altogether. Fred Francis at the Pentagon, I think, has the latest for us, if I can hear over the din of the helicopter. Fred?
Yeah, Tom, this has gone off like clockwork. They practice this time in, time out, every month, every year, and it has been precision, in fact. It was scheduled to begin 8:30 p.m. our time, 4:30 a.m. Somali time. It went off exactly as planned. They did not expect opposition, but they had to go in as if they were getting opposition. These are amphibious vehicles that have come off the landing ship Juno, and they carry some 10, 12 Marines. They took up the farthest perimeter positions around the airport, and they were the first to come in after the initial wave of SEALs and long-range reconnaissance. These are the CH-46s, the Sea Stallion helicopters. This assault, with quotes, came in about 30 minutes ago, each of them carrying about 25 Marines. And they landed at the north end of the Mogadishu airport, the end closest to the city, which is about 3 miles north. Their primary goal was to secure that north end, and above it you can see a Cobra helicopter. That Cobra helicopter, a gunship, and there another one in the left part of your picture. Those gunships have been there since the start of the assault. This is an LCAT, a hovercraft. It can climb an 8-foot wall. It comes from that Navy ship, largely carrying light armored vehicles. Very few troops, but light armored vehicles coming ashore. That was probably the first thing the reporters and the Somalis saw this morning. They're very, very loud. The landing ship Juno there in the background. This will all take another hour or so, and about 3 hours from now, that airport will be open.
Well, Fred, we want to tell you as well that they're already at work in securing this area. A number of the so-called technicals, those are the kind of the yahoos who are right around here in Toyota pickup trucks, thought they could fool the Marines. They drove their pickups up to the airport and hid their weapons beneath the seats. Well, the Marines, needless to say, were not fooled. The warlords in Somalia have said they want their people to cooperate. They don't want any trouble because they know they can only come up on the losing end. We've asked NBC's Martin Fletcher to give us an assessment of the resistance that might be mounted should the warlords decide to do so.
Edid's army, in American military terms, an ill-disciplined, untrained mob that spends most of its time high on drugs. But this isn't America. This is a place of anarchy and has been for 2 years. Here, Edid's army is the most powerful war force, first among a dozen military clans. They led the fight that threw out Siad Barre, the Somali dictator, a year ago. A bitter, violent struggle that began as an underground movement of intellectuals and soldiers and ended in a year-long war that almost destroyed the country. The rest was destroyed in the power struggle among the revolutionaries that followed. Mohammed Edid, an ex-general trained by the Soviet Union, claims to control 30,000 fighters. Other Somalis say maybe 5,000. Either way, this is not an army in any regular sense. It's a loose confederation of extended families, each of which Edid must flatter, bribe, threaten to stay in his umbrella coalition called the SNA, the Somali National Alliance. Military functions are often divided among clans. The Saad family runs most of what they call the technicals, battle vehicles patched together from jeeps or Toyota trucks and old Soviet machine guns or anti-aircraft weapons. They're often dismissed as antiquated, but they say here an old bullet hurts just as much as a new one. Most of the bushfighters come from the Ayer family. It's their access to food through looting from the aid agencies that keeps them loyal. But when the food stops coming, as it may when the Marines take over, this is what can happen. He wanted to kill us. He wanted money, $10 or we're dead, he said. Our guards, Edid's people, told him these are journalists, friends. They want to help Somalia. I don't take orders from anyone, he shouted. Give me money or food.
You get a sense here of how dangerous it is here in the center of town. This is the edge of General Edid's power. He runs 11 of Mogadishu's 14 districts.
Nobody knows to what extent Edid really controls his army, or if they'd obey him if he said, put down your weapons. But Edid is trying to organize better. These are the beginnings of a new police force, all loyal to Edid, they say. Also poorly equipped, poorly trained, but it's a start. Edid wants these men to form the nucleus of a force that would replace the United Nations. Somalia, says Edid, for the Somalis.
Well, there are bound to be some awkward moments in any situation like this. Martin Fletcher has been here for a couple of times in the last 3 months or so, of course, and he has seen the bizarre quality of this country. That all came together tonight when the overeager Marines and the very naive Somalians came together at this airport, and we saw this kind of prisoner taking at the outset. It was a situation that was embarrassing, I think, for both sides. It was quickly resolved by General Labudi. The Somalians were released. These particular Somalians were not armed at the time. So, Jane, we're now off to a much smoother beginning and it's going to be a long day here. It will be another long day tomorrow, but maybe by Friday or Saturday they can get along with the business of, as a matter of fact, I think we have General Labudi is just joining us, so why don't we just invite him in here, Jane, and we can talk to him a little bit. Hi, Commander, how are you? Nice to see you. Why don't you sit down, General Labudi? Why don't you join? All right. Colonel, tell me your name, and you were running the mission here today.
Well, my men were running the mission, sir. I'm Colonel Greg Newbold.
And you came off the Juno?
We came off 3 ships that were off the coast. I came off the Tripoli, in fact.
And in fact, did it go as smoothly as you wanted it to?
Went very smoothly, and part of I think the credit for that is to the Pakistanis. They did a very good job, and we integrated well with them.
There was a little confusion here at the outset about the role of the Somalians that you found at the airport.
We were uncertain as to the environment. We hoped for the best, and we're prepared for the worst. When we enter a situation where it is completely uncertain, as you would expect, the security of our forces have to take some precedence. I think we stabilized the situation, and I think right now there's no problem.
What's the briefing for your men about rules of engagement? Because there are a lot of weapons around this country.
There are an awful lot of weapons. It's a very complex situation. We have been given rules of engagement that we think are extremely appropriate, and they've been briefed to all the men. And as you know, we don't discuss rules of engagement. So,
Tom,
how long do you think it'll be before you can move out of the airport and begin escorting the convoys to get the food to the areas where it's needed most?
That depends really entirely on the situation we find here. We feel that by now we've pretty much stabilized the local area, but while we control the physical environs of the airport, it's necessary to control the ground that dominates the airport, so there can be no interdiction of the flights and the relief supplies that have to come in here, and the people that can operate and feed the Somalians.
What gave you the greatest trouble? The darkness, the terrain, or the hordes of press that swarmed all over you?
The third was very definitely the greatest challenge we had. The first 2 were no problem at all.
Colonel, thanks very much for coming by. I know that you have a busy day ahead of you. Thank you very much. Thank
Tom,
you.
can I follow that up?
Well, Jane, things now do seem to be off to a good beginning, and the Marines are feeling that they've got the situation here well under control.
Tom, I'd like to ask you a question, if I might, given that none of us will ever forget the bizarre scene of the Navy SEALs arriving with the media swarming around them with the TV lights and whatnot. Does the Pentagon want the media... Hello. We're going to go to a commercial while the helicopter noise clears Tom. We'll be back.
Continuing now our special on the American mission in Somalia. Operation Restore Hope, announced just last Friday by President Bush, now underway. A live shot once again from Somalia. It began about 4:20 Eastern Time this afternoon. That's just shortly after midnight Somali time. And despite the anarchy that prevails in this country without a government caught in a bloody civil war, the first arrivals of what will soon be an overwhelming military force have been greeted with relative calm and hopefully a spirit of cooperation. No shots have been fired. Earlier this evening, about a half a dozen Somalis were held on the ground at gunpoint by Marines, taking no chances. What you're seeing now is a hovercraft making its way from the ships, 11 of them out in the Indian Ocean, to the coast. It will land, roll up over the dunes and onto the tarmac at the airport in Mogadishu. Well, for the next several minutes, we are going to be checking in with NBC News correspondents covering different aspects of this story. First, some specifics on the mission itself. What does the military foresee in the days and weeks ahead? And our Pentagon correspondent, Fred Francis, is with us.
It is time for the lieutenant colonels and the captains, the gunnery sergeants and the corporals. The politicians, generals, and admirals must now sit back and worry. And in the next 48 hours at the Mogadishu airport, the shovel will be as important as the gun, electric circuits as vital as combat perimeters, the traffic cop a greater authority than the platoon sergeant. Without the hardware and engineers, the 28,000 troops will not have a base from which to support the humanitarian mission. Colonel Glenn Cassidy just retired from the Joint Chiefs, where he did this kind of planning.
So in order to move into the interior, we're going to have to pre-position gasoline and other commodities along the way to create way stations, if you will. We're going to have to make sure that security is online. Luckily, we're going to have air cover.
The military's first priority, putting in runway lights at Mogadishu Airport, carving out areas to park airplanes and equipment, and setting up a working control tower.
The units that have been deployed are already the airfield control groups, the Seabees. Their missions are really to open up the airfield and make it so that we can get more troops in. We have to create marshalling areas for these troops before they do move out into the breakout.
Right now, the airport ramps can handle only 3 of these C-141 cargo planes at one time. The runway lights will turn the airport into a 24-hour operation. Until those tasks are complete, only a few planes with the first of thousands of Marines from Camp Pendleton will be able to go to Somalia. So during the first few days, while Marines on security patrol keep watch for Somali thugs, engineers, electricians, airport experts, and logisticians will establish a major staging area. All that before the first bag of grain is escorted into the countryside next week. Officials here say they know people are starving, and 1,000 or more may die while a base camp is set up. But Marines must conduct reconnaissance patrols before attempting to escort food convoys. Only then will the business of delivering sacks of grain from the port begin. Over the weekend, Marines will airlift to Baidoa, a regional town, set up a mini headquarters there before taking control of feed centers in the desperate villages of Beledweyne, Obia, Jalassia, and south of Mogadishu along the coast. At the same time, more than 6 dirt airstrips will be taken over and made ready for U.S. Army forces late next week. It will be done methodically, with a sense of urgency, but no mistakes. When these GIs from Fort Drum, New York arrive, a basic security system and distribution plan should be rolling. And this mission, muting the madness, turning chaos to comfort, saving the Somalis, will be underway.
Fred Francis is standing by at the Pentagon now. And Fred, so far the reception has been relatively calm, but U.S. aircraft flying relief missions over the past several weeks have been hit by small weapons fire, so this is not an operation without some considerable risk.
That is quite true. In fact, I would expect we're going to lose some soldiers. The warlords control some parts of Mogadishu. They control some parts of the countryside. But there are Islamic fundamentalists in the country. Sudan, which is a hotbed of Islamic fundamentalism, is not far away. They could infiltrate people. And so I expect there will be some firefights. There will be some aircraft shot at. But I don't expect it to be a lot. But this is not risk-free, and it certainly won't be casualty-free.
In the real world, what is the Pentagon expecting by way of casualties?
I don't think they have a clean estimate of that. They're hoping they get away with a few, but every operation that has 28,000 men and women are going to have some losses, and this will have some losses.
Fred Francis at the Pentagon. Thank you.
Well, the mood at the Pentagon, serious but not high anxiety, is also the mood at the White House. Just a few weeks ago, President Bush was publicly fretting about having nothing to do. Now Operation Restore Hope has given the president a sense of mission for his final weeks in office. As White House correspondent John Cochran reports, his road to Somalia began last summer.
August 1992. Famine, war, and death in Somalia. Politics in the USA. A beleaguered George Bush is privately warned by national security advisors that Somalia is disintegrating. Bush agrees to airlift food and Pakistani soldiers. At this point, Bush believes a full-scale American effort is neither necessary nor politically possible because voters would suspect it was a cynical maneuver to get him reelected. He does not get reelected.
Maybe you didn't read the election returns. It didn't work out quite the way we wanted.
In the first days after his defeat, Bush's aides worry about him. When he meets with his cabinet, one cabinet official is shocked by Bush's depressed manner. Aides look for things to keep him busy, but they don't have to look to find Somalia. 2 weeks after the election, on November 20th, Bush's advisors began talking privately about U.S. intervention. Events break quickly. 4 days later, UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali sends a letter to Security Council members saying he can no longer guarantee delivery of food and medicine. Somalia is back on the world's radar screen.
It's a place where 1,000 died today, and 1,000 will die tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that.
According to administration sources, on November 25th, the day before Thanksgiving, Bush asked his National Security Council whether he should send in U.S. troops. Brent Scowcroft worries that it would be tough to get them out once they are in. Defense Secretary Cheney and General Colin Powell are more optimistic. White House Chief of Staff Jim Baker agrees, but doesn't say much. In the back of everyone's mind, a diplomatic cable from Ambassador to Kenya Smith Hempstone, who warned that if you liked Beirut, you'll love Mogadishu. But by the time Bush plays a wet round of golf that same afternoon in Kennebunkport, he has decided to push ahead. The U.S. submits its plan to save thousands of lives to the UN Security Council. It is accepted. The next day, December 4th, Bush announces that U.S. troops will go to Somalia. Today, his spokesman, Marlon Fitzwater, told NBC News that Somalia has changed the mood of a lame duck president.
Has the Somalian crisis given the president a new sense of purpose in the remaining days of his administration?
Well, in a way, I think that's true. Certainly, we were facing a couple of months of transition where basically everything you're doing is closing down. You're terminating programs, you're terminating people, you're looking for new jobs for yourself. This problem was thrust upon us. It's a world responsibility we felt we had to meet. But it does indeed give us a new initiative that gives new energy to the administration, because we want to do a good job and we want to leave it for the Clinton administration in as good a hands as we possibly can.
John Cochran now. The president went to a Christmas party tonight, didn't he? A gesture of confidence?
Well, it was already scheduled. He's feeling good. He feels that the initial landings went well. He issued a statement which was actually written before the landing took place, saying that he was pleased that it went well. That was, of course, before these people who came in met the American news media. But here around the White House, they're not too worried about that. They're just thankful that it has gone well so far. And they think that history will judge George Bush rather well because of what he's ordered here.
John, does the president, the Pentagon, the White House, do they want the media there or not want the media there?
Well, they do and they don't. They don't want us to get in the way, but they want us there, showing that American troops can do a lot of things in the years after the end of the Cold War, that American troops can go in and do such things as go into south central Los Angeles and help people there, go and help the Kurds in northern Iraq, do a lot of things that might convince Congress not to punish the Defense Department too severely by cutting its budget, Jane.
Unexpected legacy the president leaves to his successor. Thank you, John. And what is in store for Bill Clinton? Even before taking the oath of office, he's gotten a clue to how quickly events can overtake a president's agenda. As Andrea Mitchell reports, governing is an altogether different world from campaigning.
During the campaign, Bill Clinton said that unlike George Bush, he would be the domestic policy president.
Our first foreign policy priority and our first domestic priority must be one and the same: a revitalized economy. For we cannot be strong abroad if we are not strong at home.
But when he takes office, nearly 30,000 American troops will most likely still be engaged in an unprecedented military relief operation thousands of miles from home, an issue he was already confronting on Capitol Hill today.
I believe our administration will be forced to spend a lot of time on foreign policy, whether we want to or not.
Even though he had no voice in deciding to send the troops, Clinton will have to find a way to bring them home and see that whatever is accomplished isn't undone as soon as they leave.
We can either try to focus on these problems, get ahead of them, come up with a decent policy, and aggressively pursue it, at the same time focusing much, much more energy on rebuilding the American economy and the promise of the American people. Or we can ignore it for a while, wait for it to explode, then the problems will swarm on us, and I might have to spend all my time on foreign policy.
For a man who is focused almost exclusively on domestic issues, Clinton, according to senior aide Samuel Berger, does not shrink from foreign engagements.
Governor Clinton is an internationalist. He believes that America must play an active role in the world based upon strength at home.
But some are concerned that having supported action in Somalia, Clinton will be pressed to do the same in Bosnia, a much riskier military setting. especially because he made Bush's refusal to stop Serbian aggression a campaign issue.
This is a matter of grave concern to me, but I don't think I should say more about specifics at this time.
And there are those who question whether Clinton has enough foreign policy experience. Aside from trade missions for Arkansas, his overseas travel was limited to his years abroad as a Rhodes Scholar and school vacations traveling, including that trip to Moscow Republicans made such a fuss over. During the campaign, Clinton talked about his foreign policy experience on Capitol Hill.
I was there, and it was great preparation for me. I worked in the United States Senate on the Foreign Relations Committee then.
In fact, he was a college intern, not a policy advisor. Some suggest that's a plus.
I think it's the qualities of mind and spirit that are really more important than whether somebody knows the politics of Somalia. For that matter, George Bush doesn't understand the politics of Somalia very well, but he has a lot of people around him who are explaining to him what the options are, and I presume that will be true of the president-elect.
Clinton said today if he is aggressive and disciplined in developing his foreign policy, he'll still be free to focus on America's problems at home. But he is learning quickly that foreign crises don't occur on anyone's schedule. Stone?
Thanks, Andrea. Andrea Mitchell tonight from Washington, D.C. We're going to go back to Somalia now for another live shot. As you can see, helicopters continuing to descend on the airport in Mogadishu, Somalia, the capital, as U.S. Marines continue their landing there. The need for this humanitarian mission, and U.S. officials do emphasize that their objective is humanitarian, not military or political, is truly overwhelming. Some 30% of Somalia's population facing death by famine or disease. American troops hoping to safeguard the delivery of food and medicine to help turn this crisis around. Turning back now from the military to the political, what is the talk behind the scenes in both the Bush and Clinton camps? To get a line on what the insiders think, we're going to head down to Washington now, and our Washington Bureau Chief, Tim Russert. Tim, given the enormous need that we've been seeing in Somalia and the devastating pictures of starvation coming out of there, we haven't heard a lot of opposition to this mission. And yet, how much concern is there behind the scenes, especially within the Clinton camp, that Bill Clinton may be inheriting a foreign policy problem that he just didn't need?
Well, you're right, Stone. While there's been public support, there's a lot of private concern, even resentment, that George Bush didn't undertake this mission 3 months ago. They consider some that it's a policy crisis being dumped at their doorstep, and they fear it'll be a major distraction from President-elect Clinton's attempt to appoint an economic team this week, his economic summit next week, even his inauguration or first 100 days. They wish the president had resolved this before this period of time.
Tim, how is all of this playing with the Washington military establishment? Are they concerned at all about the precedent of doing this kind of police work, or does this present a whole new opportunity?
Stone, they're looking for a mission after the Cold War, and what they see this as a major public relations opportunity. You saw the cameras there tonight welcoming the SEALs. We'll have unprecedented access. They hope to increase recruits to the volunteer army. They also keep the pipelines of support coming from Congress and public support. You're going to see an awful lot of hoopla involving this operation, and what they hope is they can continue their budget and their mission post-Cold War.
Tim, in a Washington Post editorial this week, Evans and Novak described this mission as history's first armed invasion of a foreign country propelled by conscience. But how long is that spurt of conscience going to continue amongst practical-minded politicians if Americans start dying in Somalia?
Stone, folks on the Hill tell me tonight, as long as the focus can be on those starving babies, it's one thing. If there become a steady stream of body bags, they think the American people will lose their patience relatively quickly. And that again points back to George Bush. George Bush would prefer to leave office on a successful humanitarian mission to Somalia as opposed to a losing political campaign in America.
Thanks, Tim. Tim Russert tonight in Washington. And when we come back, the man on the street. How do Americans, rich and poor, feel about helping Somalia?
The pictures certainly speak for themselves. We can't allow that to continue. When is it all going to end? If we don't do it, who will?
It's a goodwill gesture. I hope it helps the country. As a long-term thing, I don't know what's going to happen.
Although the missions couldn't be more different, one can't help but remember that this holiday season 2 years ago, Americans were anxious on the eve of Desert Storm. How does the public feel about what we're doing for Somalia? NBC's John Gibson has been finding out.
It's Christmas time, a time for giving. This year, Americans' thoughts are with people who have so little they can't even eat. and most are saying that Somalia deserves our help.
It's part of our culture to help people out. We fought wars for other people. We've always fed people who were starving.
It's incredible that we've waited so long. I think we should have done it a while ago.
Somebody has to take the responsibility when you see the pictures on television of the starving children.
Although a poll shows that 66% of Americans do support sending troops into Somalia, there is deep concern.
I don't think America should be the policeman of the world, nor the social worker of the world.
Long term, are we going to stay there for 6 months? Are we going to stay there for a year? I don't know that all of the deadlines have been set.
People are starving in Somalia, but they're being butchered in Bosnia and in Yugoslavia. So what's the intervention over there?
591-8900 is our telephone number.
And what about our problems at home?
I think it's really stupid. I don't mean to be unfeeling. I mean, what about the people that are here that are starving?
These are hard times at home, and some wonder whether we can help Somalia and take care of our own.
We haven't even faced a deficit issue here in the United States. We have our own problems here, and I think we should be dealing with our homeless people, with the people that are going hungry here in the city and all over the country before we go and help others out in other countries.
We're homeless, but we're not starving.
In the near freezing winter nights in New York City, the homeless are stunned that any Americans would begrudge help to Somalia.
People come out and give us food, but they can't get food. They can't get medical attention. They can't get water. They can't get nothing.
This is the United States. We done helped so many other countries. Why they gonna stop now? Okay, and I can see this ain't helping nobody with no war. This ain't no Vietnam issue. This is an issue about food. These people won't let them have food, and that's a necessity. It's not no war, it's about food.
John Gibson reporting tonight from New York. A range of sentiments, many of them heartfelt. But no one watches more closely or cares more deeply than the families of American service personnel headed for Somalia. And NBC's George Lewis spent this day with one of them.
I don't know whether we're leaving today or the next day or whenever. They're still trying to work that out at work, so.
Camp Pendleton, California, 6 o'clock this morning at the Hendrickson residence. Marine Sergeant David Hendrickson trying to make these moments count.
When I get into work, I'll give you a call and let you know.
Knowing that he will be away from his wife Margie and their 2 little daughters this Christmas.
You're gonna miss your daddy, huh? You're gonna miss your daddy when he's gone, huh?
The Hendricksons have been through this before. David served in Operation Desert Storm 2 years ago.
We've been lucky in 8 years that this will only be the second Christmas that we haven't had together.
They've explained to their 3-year-old daughter Heather that Daddy has an important job, helping other little children who are starving, far, far away from here.
The biggest satisfaction I'm going to get out of it is to be able to see these kids get some food. I'll see you later, okay?
The hardest part for the Hendricksons and hundreds of other Marine families has been the uncertainty. Not knowing when David's unit will ship out. Not knowing each morning if this goodbye kiss will be the final one for the next several weeks and months.
I believe that they're prepared for 6 months right now. We always prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
8 a.m., the workday officially begins at Camp Pendleton. The men in Sergeant Hendrickson's platoon march to the base medical clinic for vaccinations. They have been inoculated against a wide variety of diseases that are present in Somalia.
Like I said, this shot is for meningitis.
And as they wait to be called up, these men are quite literally on pins and needles.
It kind of builds up to where you actually say, hey, I'll be glad when I get on the aircraft and I get out of country to go over there and do my mission. Do a function check on this weapon.
And so the men in Sergeant Hendrickson's platoon clean their weapons for the umpteenth time, trying to keep busy as they wait, hoping that those weapons won't have to be used against Somalia's heavily armed thugs.
Hopefully as long.
And wives like Margie Hendrickson wonder about the best way to keep the home fires burning.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit rough. I'll do the best I can for the girls to make it a happy Christmas. And once he does leave, then I can deal with my emotions and get myself set for, you know, how I'm going to be while he's gone.
George Lewis, can you gauge the reaction now at Camp Pendleton to the first pictures of the Marines actually landing in Somalia?
Well, I talked to the Hendricksons tonight after the landing, and the mood is still very much as it was in the days leading up to Operation Desert Storm. Let's get over there, let's get the job done, and let's get home safely.
If they're preparing for 6 months, which is, I gather, the worst-case scenario, what are they figuring on?
Well, they're figuring on eventually turning over the operation of the country to the United Nations forces. They don't know how practical that's going to be, and they don't know what kind of resistance they're going to meet when they get there. They don't think they'll meet much in the way of resistance because there are no organized armies opposing them, but the Marines do remember what happened to some of their brethren in Beirut in 1983 when a bomb took 240-some lives, so they're going to be very cautious.
Serious business indeed. Thank you, George Lewis. Stone?
Thanks, Jane. And we're going to go back again for a live shot from the Mogadishu International Airport in Somalia. Phase 1 of Operation Restore Hope well underway. Marines there being videotaped by the media. Marines now in charge, establishing a security blanket for the engineers and technicians who will follow. We'll be back after these messages. In the mind of most people, Somalia has had but one image: starvation. But the woman we're about to meet remembers an altogether different Somalia, and in recent months she has dedicated herself to saving the people of her homeland. You know her face, even if you don't know her name. Dateline's Lee Thompson on the mission of a woman named Iman.
The anguish of a starving child, a moment captured by Somali-born fashion model Iman in the documentary Somalia Diary. After fleeing Somalia with her family 20 years ago, Iman returned to her homeland in September with a British television crew.
Last time I saw this place was in 1972.
The wrenching scenes of starvation and misery they filmed there have done much to publicize the chaos and famine that now engulfs much of Somalia. And now that American and UN troops are moving into the country, Somalia's most famous expatriate is focusing her efforts on convening a national peace conference for Somalia. Earlier today, we talked with Iman about her film, her trip, and her mission.
I remember white houses and pink houses, sweet, sweet, fragile Somalian air. So when I went back, I was shocked to see what has happened and how it was totally destroyed. Not only that the beauty of it was destroyed, the comfort, the tradition, the people, their emotions, psychologically, they were totally destroyed.
We Americans have seen all the devastating pictures, but can you put words to those pictures?
The most awful thing that I saw on the trip to Somalia was the children. To see children being taught the Quran in the courtyard, and in the middle of it there is a child dead, lying dead there. And the worst thing to them, for a Somali and a Muslim, is not finding a proper burial ground or a proper burial. I've seen people buried in masses, in grounds, no prayers. It's a sad experience.
When you look at all that devastation, though, you wonder if this country can ever be put back together again.
We are all afraid for Somalia. It's very fragile. It's not that many people, and a lot of them are dead already.
Why did Iman get involved in this issue? It'd be so easy to step back and live the good life in America, yes, but you've gotten very, very involved in this.
I can see it. I can feel it. I can smell it. The change in the air. Troops are going in. So I can't stop now. I know I can sense it. I can sense it, and I owe it to them. Maybe the world doesn't owe anything to Somalia, but I owe it to them.
As our troops go ashore tonight, what are they going to see?
Beautiful ocean, beautiful beaches, one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. What will they see? Lots of Somalis coming to rejoice them for their arrival. What will they see? Lots of children.
Orphans.
Orphans. The smell mixed with death and salt air. The air has density when there's death around. Then there's flies. I mean, I grew up in Somalia. I've never seen so many flies because I'm sure it's because of the lack of proper burial ground. So when it rains on it, everything comes back up. And so there is density to the air. That's very unfamiliar.
And awful.
Very awful.
Our U.S. troops are going into a country that is very, very dangerous. And there are a lot of mothers and friends and relatives out there who are very worried that their sons and daughters may not come home. What do you think is the risk?
I don't think that there will be organized attacks on the troops.
But I watched your documentary. Here you are driving down the road, minding your own business.
Keep it down!
And all of a sudden you're caught in this crossfire and you could have been killed, easily killed.
Keep going! Keep going! Move!
Isn't that sort of thing likely to happen to our American troops?
Yes. I would lie if I say no. Yes, it could.
It raises another whole specter that we don't normally see when we go in for humanitarian efforts.
There is danger, but I hope that people understand that that's part of the job of being military. Because if that's not done, 1 million people will be dead in 3 months. So will there be casualties? Probably. Will it be worth it? Definitely.
Thank you, Lee Thompson. Imam raises the picture of the Somalis coming to greet the Marines. Well, what about it? Let's go back to Mogadishu at the airport. Tom Brokaw, it's been 2 hours since the Marines began landing. Have you seen crowds yet?
But they're very much on the perimeter of the airport, Jane. They're on rooftops and they're being held at the gate. They cannot get close to this airport. The Marines want to first secure this place. The Marines, for now, are just at the airport and the port in the heart of the city. But sooner or later, they will have to enter the city of Mogadishu, which, of course, has been a battleground between the warlords Adid and Ali Mahdi. What will they see? Well, here's a tour. This is not just the preferred means of transportation in downtown Mogadishu. It's about the only means of transportation if you want to get around securely. These are called technicals. We're going to give you a little tour of this city now, what the Marines can expect to see. We've got guards with us here, Hassan and Abdi. They're 2 armed members of the militia, and we have to take them wherever we go. The U.S. forces won't find much heavy artillery. The warlords are not superpowers. This is a Somalia fighter. So is this. When it comes to the street barricades, American troops shouldn't have much trouble rolling right on through. If General Adid does not tell his people to turn in their weapons, this is what American Marines and other U.S. forces will find when they get to Mogadishu. A ragtag army, but their weapons, however antiquated, still are lethal. Back on the road again, more or less. The main market. Not much in the way of souvenirs from Somalia. And the local narcotic, chat. Although easy to buy, surely it must be off limits. Any drive through Mogadishu is a reminder of the primitive struggle in this city. A city that's the victim of a long and deadly war. What appear to be green huts in the background are really the most primitive kind of shelters. Those are the people who have come in from the country. That's in the background. Can you see in the foreground the clay mounds of dirt? Those are all graves. They come here every day to bury the dead of Somalia. Even so, the American forces will find the people of Somalia are often smiling, and Somalian women, hooded in their Muslim dress, are portraits of great beauty. The American troops will also find not all of the babies are starving, but they'll also discover all of the children want attention. Sooner or later, someone will point a gun. The man behind me with a recoilless rifle didn't want his picture taken. I tried to explain. He was not interested. And that's the great danger, of course, when the Marines get here, is that they're going to run into some yahoo like that who's been chewing chat all day long. It's now late in the afternoon, and that's about when it begins to kick in. It's when traffic gets bad, and that's when the trigger fingers begin to get itchy. Traffic is the other big danger for the American troops. This city is one big wreck-em derby. In addition to the normal traffic problems of Mogadishu, the Marines are going to encounter as well what can only be described as the media gridlock. Reporters, cameramen, and technicians from all over the world in here hiring drivers at $100 a day and all arriving in the same intersection at the same time. Well, in fact, Stone, I was on the short end. It's $150 a day, and you got to pay an extra $50 for a translator, and you got to pay the drivers as well. We don't know whether those drivers will continue to carry their weapons around. They've already been confiscated here at the airport as they've arrived with some of our producers and editors and couriers.
Tom, the shots of those makeshift graves in Mogadishu are so haunting, and yet that city really is not the worst of it. The worst is upcountry, isn't it?
It is. It's in the interior where a lot of those technicals, the so-called, I call them the yahoos, they're out there. They've had in a place called Bidao, they've had a very strong fight in the last 3 or 4 days, and a lot of people there were already in grave trouble before that fighting began. And that's the urgent need now, is to get the food from this area to the interior, and that's why the Marines need to be here, because otherwise those convoys simply get hijacked.
Tom Brokaw reporting from Mogadishu. We'll be back with some final thoughts in just a moment. Going back now once again live to Mogadishu, Somalia, where the Marines continue to converge on the airport there, which of course was secured earlier this evening.
Because you're going to need that kind of...
You're looking at a videotape shot here just a few moments ago of a hovercraft making its way to the shore there at the Mogadishu International Airport. A smooth beginning for Operation Restore Hope. What lays ahead in this land of warring factions is less certain. The Marine colonel who's heading up the strike force put it well, I think, tonight when he said that somebody dialed 911 and we came. Back to Tom Brokaw. Tom, any final thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that I think everybody now breathes a sigh of relief that this part of the operation went extremely well. It'll take a couple of days for them to get everything in place. But then the urgent mission, as the general just told me, the center of gravity here, as he describes it for these Marines, is to get the food to the countryside. That, again, will become phase 2 and the more dangerous part of the mission. We can only hope that the people of Somalia will be so grateful for their presence that there will be no incidents whatsoever.
Tom Brokaw reporting live tonight. Thank you, Tom. Get some rest if you can. Jane.
You know, we've been watching this all evening. It's taken place during the night in Somalia, where there is no electricity, so there is no radio, there is no television to report. To wake up this morning and see that the Americans have arrived with the noise of the hovercrafts and the helicopters must be quite an intimidating or a heartening development to wake up to.
Yeah, and I think we should guard against being too overly optimistic about this. I mean, there still are many risks that lie ahead. This is a country with warring factions. It is a very uncertain situation, despite the show of force by the American Marines. So we shall see in the days and weeks ahead.
There are loaded weapons out there somewhere, and they're not all in the hands of the Marines.
That's right.
Well, NBC News will have continuing coverage of Operation Restore Hope with live coverage as events warrant.
And tomorrow morning on Today, I'll be sitting in for Bryant Gumbel. I hope you will join Katie Couric and me for the latest developments. I'm Stone Phillips.
And I'm Jane Pauley.
And for everyone here at NBC News, good night.
Near a ship, the USS Rushmore, further